doing all the things for. If they're taking care of it.
Any other questions about this portion before we take a break and then transition into it? So what do we do with all of it? I mean, the next portion of this is going to be the fun part, when we actually learn what do we do with all of it.
I was going to say that because when you're in with people, they kind of look at you like an angel, so they might ask for advice, and so we just direct them to the Redwood Center. That that because they will assume that we know.
Absolutely.
So.
Please,
And you just say, give them a little card or something and say, she'll be happy to.
And I brought a stack of brochures. I brought a stack of brochures to leave here. So you can bring the brochure, or you can direct them to hospice and have them get in touch.
Because they do things that you,
if they start to like you real well, then start asking. And you can say, these are the folks who trained me.
Right.
So, and their role is to provide ongoing support for you. So the information's just one thing, but they might want to be able to sign up for our classes. They might want some individual counseling. They might want to come to the support group. They might want, some respite grants. They can have the volunteer and the grant. If they want to go on vacation, a hospice volunteer is not going to spend a night there for a week, right? But we might be able to give $1,000 so that they could do that, so that your understanding of the resources can be quite helpful. Absolutely. But you're absolutely right. I wouldn't be giving advice in the capacity as a volunteer.
Refer.
I would just refer, and I would hold myself to that too. I mean, that's outside of the scope of volunteerism. Anything else? Did most of this make a little bit of sense?
Very much.
Okay. So why don't we plan to take a half-hour break? We'll come back at 12:30 and we'll jump into managing communication challenges. I've got some video clips for us to watch. I've got lots of anecdotal in terms of making decisions about their own care. And it would be incredibly insulting for a person with this kind of brain to have their family making decisions behind their back. And to have people, not giving them the whole truth because they think they can't handle it. That's disrespectful for someone who's got a brain that's working like this. But for this brain,
He's not driving anymore.
they shouldn't be. It's too much responsibility. It's not respectful to require someone whose brain isn't working to process at a level that's difficult for those of us who have working brains. And a lot of these end-of-life decisions, a lot of these medical decisions, are difficult and stressful for those of us who are in tip-top shape because they're so complicated. So somebody with a brain that's not working, we require them to have all the facts and sit at the table and drive the boat and give them all this information. What we're doing is counterproductive to our goal, right? Our goal is to be respectful. Our goal is to convey that we want them involved. But what we end up doing is inundating them with more information and anxiety than their brains can process. And I don't think that's fair to them. So it's not about keeping them out of the loop because we know better. It's about not requiring them to have to be in a position where they're anxious and threatened and they don't have any tools to manage the complicated tasks. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we're gonna focus right now on kind of getting our brains into thinking about joining their reality rather than requiring them to join into our reality. And many, many wonderfully big-hearted, well-intended people try to reorient a person with dementia.
Won't work.
A, it doesn't work, right?
I know.
Plain and simple, it doesn't work. But Their brain's not able to join in our reality anymore. Our brain can go to them and can join with them. And the place where we join is where they're still intact. Emotion, instinct, and intuition. Those three things we talked about before, right? People with dementia maintain instinct, intuition, and emotion. So that's where we go to join. And I'm going to give you all specific tips and techniques for that with real life anecdotal stories as examples. You had a question.
Yeah, do you think by asking if they want, if you give them a choice whether, the person does it, a volunteer does it, or that they want to be involved, do you think in general people have enough wherewithal to make that decision?
I don't think there's ever any in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to kind of gauge case by case. If this is somebody in earlier stages who's able to grok what you're asking them, anybody who says, hey Dad, we're going to sit down and talk about your estate, do you want to be involved?
Yeah.
He's going to say yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean he understands what you're requiring of him. So then he's at the table and he's not equipped to feel protected. He's not equipped to feel like he has a voice. He's not equipped to feel like he's got any power or control. And that's where you probably will start seeing some combativeness. And then you say, but Dad, you said you wanted to talk about it. And you're pulling your hair out. The truth is, yes, he wants to be involved because you've asked him something that he has interpreted, something important about me is going down, I should be there. Doesn't mean he groks the whole concept.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's not fair to require him to be there after the point at which he can't do it.
But that's
So
fine.
it's a tough call asking those kinds of questions. My rule of thumb usually is, we have a fact sheet at our office. When will I know? When will I know when to take the keys away? When will I know, if it's appropriate to start looking for long-term care? When will I know, when to make these big decisions? And the basic answer to that is when you're thinking about those things, it's probably time. If it's come into your mind, like, gee, I don't know if Dad's still safe driving. Yeah. Probably because Dad's not safe driving. Does that make sense? Or why would you be thinking about it? I'm getting so stressed I don't feel like I can do this anymore. I wonder when it'll be time to get help.
Well, if you were observing I'm sorry.
So if you're questioning whether or not they should be at the table, it doesn't mean we keep them totally out of the loop. We're going to learn some specific ways to keep them feeling in the loop, which is respectful. We want them to have a sense of power and control, but we don't give them the keys to the car if they're not safe, and we don't give them the knobs to the stove if they're not safe. We still create a sense of safety, security, personal power, and control in other ways, where the outcome doesn't matter because no one's going to get hurt, nothing's going to get broken that we care about. Does that make sense? But be really careful about asking a question, because they're interpreting the question and answering based on their interpretation. And their interpretation is based on what their broken brain has taken in. Does that make sense? So our realities, really, my reality, your reality, is based on my 5 senses. Right? What I see, hear, smell, taste, or feel is all information coming into my brain. And I put that information together to construct my experience. So we're all in the same room, at the same training, hearing the same thing, and we're all going to walk away with subtly different experiences based on what else is on our brain, what side of the room we're sitting on, are we hot, are we cold, are we hungry, are we thirsty? Do we have a headache? Were we up all night? Do we think this is a waste of our time? Why did we come? Do we love it? I mean, everybody's going to have a subtly different takeaway, even though we've all been in the same room. So imagine if a person with dementia was in this room. They're going to have a vastly different takeaway. Does that make sense? So sometimes language gets really, really confusing. That's where I say, oh, that's when he sounded lucid, not when he actually was completely lucid, right? Because we can ask someone something they could answer, we can assume they got what we were talking about, and we can still be two ships passing in the night. So be really careful. It doesn't mean we never ask them a question, it just means we only ask questions where it doesn't matter what they say, right? We can accommodate the answer. If we can't accommodate, we're not gonna even approach that subject. Does that make sense? Okay. So the first concept and the main concept with communicating with a person with dementia is we have to be willing to join in their reality rather than requiring them to join into ours. It is not helpful to reorient a confused person with dementia to reality. It's not helpful and it's not possible. And in fact, most people with dementia, when you try to use logic and reasoning to reorient them to reality, become more upset. Because our good intention to help them understand, to help them recognize, to help them remember, gets interpreted by their brain as we're lying to them, we've made that up, we think they're crazy, we don't trust them, we're taking over their life. And then their ability to trust us, remember they're working out of instinct and intuition, their ability to trust us and further desire to cooperate with us diminishes. Because why would they trust someone who lies to them and makes things up and takes away their dignity and takes away their freedom and butts into their life? So we set the stage for ourselves to be the safe person when we join into their reality. Even though we might think we're being helpful, trying to reorient or help them remember. If we could help a demented person remember, we would be very rich people because we've cured the disease, right? So the goal is, our desire is to help them remember, especially if it's a family member we're caring for. The desire is great to help them remember. And that's where a huge piece of the grief comes in. I want them to be how they used to be and I can't make it so. That's our desire, but it shouldn't be our goal. It's not a realistic goal. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I have a video clip here. This is from a movie called Complaints of a Dutiful Daughter. Many of you may have seen it. If you haven't, I really recommend it. We have it available in our lending library. I'm not sure if it's available in this library, but certainly you can rent it from us if you'd like. And it was an Oscar-nominated movie. A woman in the Bay Area whose mother had Alzheimer's disease. She made a documentary of it. Her process from when her mother started having symptoms throughout the disease process and how she kind of made the transition from helping reorient mom, right?
I hate that word.
To joining in mom's reality, which actually ended up being more helpful to both of them.
Absolutely.
It's counterintuitive. We think our goal is to help with functioning when reality requires us to accommodate functioning. Does that make sense? So the picture on this might not be so good. I was trying it earlier. Dr. Ware said the picture wasn't showing up well. If the picture doesn't work, just pay attention to the audio. Okay?
So what is the name of it again?
It's Complaints of a Dutiful Daughter.
Because I'll see if we have a mess of tapes, and I'm not sure we may have it.
I think you may have this one. If not, it's a good one to have.
169th Street in Flushing.
Oh, well, that's where all of us live.
I'm gonna rewind
Right.
it just a tad. I want you to hear the beginning of that sentence. There we are, on the train.
It's become a little puff that has occasionally some something, some substance to it.
Can everyone hear?
Mostly it's kind of a blur, which is a little hard for me to take.
But of course, I would always know you because I've known you since you were little.
You knew me when I was born,
Were you really?
because
I was across the street or something. Where were you born? What street?
169th Street in Flushing.
Oh, well, that's where all of us lived.
Right.
169th Street, yeah. So I know that I knew you, I knew Francis, I knew, wait a minute.
Is it on channel 3? Did you ever try 4? Sometimes in the back of this or that. On the TV.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Well, what did I do in between then?
If it makes you dizzy, just listen. Look.
She seems to be, at times, at periods, so suffering herself from the confusion and from the feeling stupid and from the feeling shamed and incompetent.
Debbie, darling, I am your stupid mother. I've got everything mixed up. I didn't do anything I was wanted to do or didn't do. And we didn't have a lovely outing and all sorts of things because I can't remember from one minute to the next what I do and don't do.
I really loved my mother when I was growing up. I felt very, very loved by her. But with the Alzheimer's, there were times that she was very hostile. There were times she was very hostile to me. Sometimes in particular to me because I was the person there the most. I was the person kind of trying to keep the lid on her, trying to keep order, which was so frustrating and aggravating to her that she would really turn on me and sort of see me as the enemy, which was really painful. For the longest time, I still insisted on truth, reality being important. So she would say it was April when it was May, and I would say, oh no, it's May. And finally it dawned on me, I have to be out of my mind. I mean, what does it matter? First of all, so she'll say, oh, it's May, and the next minute she won't remember that it's May anyhow. And secondly, what does it matter if she thinks it's April? If she was really convinced that we were in the sorority together at UC, or we were in elementary school together, at a certain point I realized, why not? Why not say, well, actually, no, I haven't seen any of the AU5 girls lately, as opposed to saying, well, no, I didn't go to UC when you did because I'm your daughter and you're that much older than me. And it was a liberating moment when I could just say, no, I haven't seen anybody from AU5, have you? And it was kind of light and fun, and then we were in the moment, and the moment was we were two old friends trying to reminisce, and the contents didn't matter. It was the feeling.
You're going to be here, and Francis, and me. Who else?
That's it.
That's it. And we're all going to be here, and so it should be lovely.
Good.
I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is, but it should be. I love that piece. It shows she is now trusting her daughter enough to show her underbelly. She's not having to pretend like she knows what's going on because the daughter lets her save face.
And what difference does it make?
Right.
It's April or May.
So the piece I love is when she says, the content didn't matter, it was the feeling. Why does that work? It's kind of a pop quiz.
It's one of the three things they have left.
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Their emotions remain intact. So their emotions might not make sense to us, given the circumstances, but we have to remember that their emotions are always true for them, just like ours are true for us. They're perceiving the circumstances differently. So we can join in their emotions. The content didn't matter, it was the feeling. And you know, because this is a short movie, she couldn't go into the ins and outs of how she arrived there. That's one of the things I wish they talked about more. How did she arrive at that place that was so liberating? That's a difficult place to be. When I do trainings for professionals, often what I hear is, well, I'm fine with the client. It's their darn family that's driving me nuts. If that daughter would just leave her alone. But the truth is, the desire of the daughter's heart was for mom to know who she was. And so it took a lot of grieving and a lot of work to get to the liberating place of being able to join in the feeling and let go of the content. Because that's acquiescing to the fact that mom doesn't know me anymore. And I mention that because you might go into someone's house and you might see someone with their parent or their husband or their wife or whoever not following the things we're going to talk about today, and it might just stick in your craw. So be soft with that and understand this person's grieving, and this might be really, really hard for them. And I don't have the same emotional attachment to this person, and I don't have the same history with this person that they might have. It might be really hard for you to see it.
That's really a hard position once we go out in the community and be a volunteer. I was worrying about that. So what would you suggest to them once you see that and they're going to be there for, let's say, an hour, and then you see that the approach is not really the right approach? It's really hard. Now we're going to be volunteering for both sides. How are we?
I just model, when I do home visits, I just model the way that I know works. And I don't get into it with the family member. I wouldn't in that moment say, you know, you're doing, that doesn't make sense because I learned this, da 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 da. They might not want you to come back. They might feel judged by you in that moment. Later on, you might offer some support. But I think sometimes just modeling and having the person see, oh my gosh, that's working. You also have to be careful though when you're in their home and somebody tells you something wacky and you go along with it because you're joining in their reality and it makes the family member go, that didn't, da, da, da. You can kind of wink at them. Just so they know, I know you're not this horrible person who's stealing their wallet, but I'm going along with them so that I can build rapport with them and they feel safe in my presence. Just a little wink. I probably wouldn't address it there in that moment.
I would say it's similar to a grandparent knowing what's best for a child and their grandchild, and just instead of trying to correct them, just model an alternative.
And you've got to build some rapport first. Once you've gone enough times and you've built rapport, often enough people might even come up to you and say, you know, what do you think I should do? when mom does this or that. You kind of have to earn that. You have to get some credibility. Was there anyone else who had a comment or a question? No. Okay, so I want, while we're in the mindset of joining in their reality, I want to start with, oh no, I made copies of the same one, which means you probably have duplicate copies of the same opposite one. Yes, you do. So the form here, the one page that says principles for understanding and communicating with a person with dementia, we're first going to outline some basic principles before we get into the specific tips and techniques. And the principles kind of give credibility to the techniques. It's near the back. Should be on the right side of your packet. Principles. Did everybody find it? So the first one here, understand what is and isn't possible to change by learning all you can about the disease. Kind of what we scratched the surface of this morning. Knowing and accepting the cognitive limitations of the person will help you set realistic expectations of the person's behavior. Right? We have to understand the behavior in the context of the disease process. Otherwise, we run the risk of misinterpreting it as intentional, and it's really just getting through the day survival behavior at the, that's determined by the disease process. If you're taking notes, next to this write, realistic expectations of myself as well. After number one. After number one. Will help you set realistic expectations of for the person's behavior. And also for myself. Because sometimes we think our job, again, is to go in and help someone remember. Our job is to go in and help someone with dementia never feel sad again. Or our job is to go in and convince them not to be angry about something they're angry with. That's unrealistic. Unrealistic, and I would suggest unnecessary. Adult people get to have emotions. So just because a person with dementia is angry or upset or grieving doesn't mean we failed. Certainly, I'm not saying go in and be cruel and cause those things. But sometimes, people have a tough day. Sometimes somebody's angry about something. If anybody has good cause to feel sad or angry, it's a person with dementia, for goodness sake. Right? So we can be realistic with the pressure we put on ourselves. We've not failed if the whole time we were with them they were upset. Right? If we can allow it and normalize it, that doesn't mean we don't engage. That doesn't mean we don't try to use some other techniques and strategies to see if we might be able to help. But sometimes when I'm angry and someone tries to cheer me up, I get mad. Because I'm angry. Sometimes if I'm sad and somebody tells me not to be sad, I don't want to talk to them anymore because I am sad.
Validate your feelings.
That's right. So we can create a sense for that person that their experience is okay and that we're not judging them and that it's okay. We're not going to process with them their feelings. That's not appropriate either. If somebody's having a flashback to World War II and flipping out, we're not going to ask them questions about the war and process with them either. I'm not suggesting we do that. But I am suggesting that if they're having a day like that, it's not because you weren't a good enough helper. Does that make sense? So realistic expectations of yourself. And I'll get back to that war example later when we talk about connecting and distracting. Right? Or my husband, where's my husband, where's my husband, where's my husband? He's been dead for 10 years. Right? Or so-and-so did such and such. I might say something like, I'm so sorry to hear about that. I hope that never happens again.
Are most of the people that are in the stages of Alzheimer's in the homes with the families taking care of them? Are they in rest homes?
I think most people are at home. you know, yeah. Most people, I mean, there's just not enough rest homes, and finances are prohibitive, and most people desire to keep their loved ones at home, and most people desire to stay at home, as long as it works. As long as it works. When it's not working, then we have to look at reality and look at placement as a good alternative option. But I would say most people, because of various factors, finances, promises, values of the family, cultural values, have people in the home. And with access to adequate support, a lot of times it can work. It can work. Sometimes the issue is that we don't have access to the support, so we need more help outside of the home, or circumstances that are different. The second one here, understand that our thoughts, attitudes, and actions significantly impact on the behavior of the person with dementia.
Absolutely.
So this is where we're talking about instinct and intuition, right? Have any of you ever held or been in a nursery, you know, where a brand new father or sibling who's never held a baby before gets handed the baby?
Yeah.
And they don't want to hurt the baby, so they hold it like this, so gently. Their intent is to be gentle.
Yeah.
But what does the baby do?
Moving around.
Why would the baby scream? Dad's being gentle. Dad loves them.
Safe.
Right. So communication doesn't require language, logic, or reasoning. That baby's 5 minutes old, doesn't have language, logic, and reasoning yet, but certainly has instinct and intuition. The message being communicated here to the baby is, ah! Quite literally, the person responsible for holding my life in the balance is not sure of themselves, therefore I'm in danger. Right? That's not Dad's intent, or brother or sister, whoever it is. It's not their intent. The intent is to be gentle and not harm the baby. The result is baby doesn't feel safe. Have you seen how the nurses hold the babies?
Oh, yeah.
First they swaddle them so tight, I think their eyeballs are going to pop out. And you said it, they hold them like a football. And who's the one person baby doesn't cry for? The nurse. Why? What's the message here?
Safe.
They can tell they've done this before.
I'm safe.
Security.
I'm safe, I'm secure. The person responsible for holding my life in the balance is sure of themselves. Therefore, I'm safe. So we have to remember that. And I'm certainly not saying we treat adult people with dementia like they're children. Don't hear me saying that. I'm saying that the type and mechanism for communication is similar. We don't have reliable logic and reasoning, we don't have reliable language, and we don't have memory. But we can still do a whole lot of communicating. This does put a lot of pressure on us, but it can feel like, oh, one more thing I have to be aware of. But if you are aware of it, it can be quite empowering, right? If you're having a bad day, you didn't sleep very well, and you go into someone's house and try to work with their loved one who has dementia, and that person is a little bit on edge and anxious the whole time, you're not going to be thrown for a loop. You're going to expect it. Oh, this might be a tricky day because I'm not batting 1,000 right now, right? Oh, this might be a tricky day because I'm really nervous about whether or not, you know, my taxes are going through, or I'm really nervous about that phone call I got this morning. So when they're nervous, it's not going to surprise me. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we can go in really empowered, understanding that we set the stage. So I would never suggest anybody bottle their emotions or their experiences, but I would suggest if you're working with a person with